Guru Nanak remains one of history's most enigmatic figures, not because he hid himself, but because he refused to fit into any box humanity tried to place him in. He was born into a world obsessed with labels: Hindu, Muslim, high caste, low caste, saint, sinner. Yet from the beginning, Nanak walked another path. He refused to inherit identity. He sought truth directly. For him, religion was never about temples or mosques, scriptures or rituals. It was a question: what is the one that breathes through all things? And he pressed that question so fiercely that it shattered the limits of the traditions around him. People called him Hindu. He said, there is no Hindu. People called him Muslim. He said, there is no Muslim. Not as an insult, but as a spiritual shockwave meant to wake a sleeping world. His mystery lies in this paradox. He didn't create a new religion, yet he ignited a revolution. He didn't reject faith, yet he tore down its walls. He didn't claim superiority, yet millions became his followers. Guru Nanak was a seeker who found unity where others saw division, a teacher whose message was too vast to belong to just one group, a voice that challenged kings and consoled beggars, a mystic who declared that the divine was not trapped in scriptures, rituals, or institutions, but lived within each human being like a hidden flame. He didn't dissolve religion out of rebellion. He dissolved religion because he saw only the one.
Before Guru Nanak was born, Punjab was a land carved into pieces, politically, socially, and spiritually. The air itself felt divided. Two great empires collided over its fields: the crumbling Delhi Sultanate and the rising power of the Mughals. Ordinary people lived between armies, taxes, raids, and uncertainty. Life felt fragile, unpredictable, and often unsafe. Religion, instead of bringing peace, had become a battlefield of its own. Hindu and Muslim communities grew apart, each guarded by rituals, rules, and fears. Caste was a prison. Superstition ruled more than wisdom. Priests of every tradition claimed to speak for God, yet most people felt spiritually starved. Truth was hidden behind ceremonies. Spirituality belonged to the elite. The poor were told simply to obey. Punjab was also a place of deep longing. Sufi saints sang of love. Bhakti poets cried out for a God beyond division. Farmers and traders whispered prayers into the dust. Everyone sensed something was missing, a unity they could feel but not see. Beneath the struggle, the land waited for a voice that could speak to all hearts at once. This was the world Guru Nanak opened his eyes into, a world thirsty for meaning, fractured by identity, and ready for someone brave enough to say the unthinkable truth that beyond religion, beyond empire, beyond fear, there is one light shining in all.
Before he became a spiritual giant, Guru Nanak was a quiet yet fiercely observant child, one who saw through the illusions most adults accepted blindly. In a world where ritual mattered more than compassion, status mattered more than truth, and fear overshadowed curiosity, young Nanak simply refused to follow the script. As other children memorized prayers they didn't understand, Nanak kept asking why. Why do we bow to God but mistreat each other? Why do we fear hell but create suffering on earth? Why do symbols matter more than kindness? Why should any human be considered higher or lower? His questions were not acts of rebellion, they were acts of clarity. When priests asked him to recite sacred verses, he remained silent until the words meant something. When he saw separation between Muslims and Hindus, he asked adults why God would ever choose sides. When teachers pushed dogma,
he countered with compassion. In a society that valued obedience, Nanak chose understanding. In a world obsessed with tradition, he sought truth. This wasn't defiance for attention, it was the early spark of a mind that saw unity where others saw division. His childhood rebellion became the seed of a spiritual revolution.
One morning, Guru Nanak walked toward the river as he had countless times before. But this time, the water did not simply touch his feet, it swallowed him whole. For 3 days he vanished. No footsteps on the bank, no ripples, no body found. Just silence. People whispered, "Has he drowned? Has a spirit taken him? Has he abandoned the world?" But the truth was far deeper. In the stillness of that river, Nanak entered a realm that words can barely point to, a space where ego dissolves, where the soul sees without eyes, where the boundary between human and divine thins to a thread. When he finally emerged, he wasn't the same man who walked in. His face was calm, but his voice carried thunder. His eyes were soft, but they held knowing far older than his body. The first thing he said was not a prayer, not a proclamation, but a proclamation that shattered centuries of division. There is no Hindu, no Muslim. Only one humanity, one source, one breath. Those 3 silent days became the turning point where a seeker transformed into a messenger, one who would challenge empires, unite communities, and rewrite the spiritual story of an age drowning in ritual and fear. What the river took was his ego. What it returned was his mission.
Before Guru Nanak, the world of 15th century Punjab was split into countless fragments: gods and castes, rituals and sects, holy men and holy books. Every group insisted their truth was the only truth. Spirituality had become a battlefield of identities. And then came 2 words that cut through centuries like lightning. Onkar. One reality, one without a second. Not a god sitting in the sky, not a deity of one tribe, not a being with a name, a form, or a limit. Nanak wasn't offering a new religion, he was exploding the old ones. Onkar means the universe is not divided, it is one continuous flow. Every human being is carved from the same essence. There is no us and them, no lesser or higher, no chosen or unchosen. The divine is not somewhere else, it is the fabric of everything. It was a declaration that terrified priests and liberated ordinary people. Because if reality is one, then no ritual can make you closer to God than another person. No caste can make you purer. No scripture can imprison truth. No temple or mosque can claim monopoly over the infinite. Onkar is not a belief. It is an experience, a perspective shift so radical that it rearranges the entire architecture of the mind. It says, look at the world without the filter of your labels, your fears, your inherited stories. What remains is unity. What remains is oneness. With 2 words, Nanak offered humanity a spiritual physics, simple, universal, beyond religion. Onkar became the opening breath of the Guru Granth Sahib and the heartbeat of a civilization built not on territory or race, but on consciousness. A reminder that beneath all noise, all conflict, all difference,
There is only one.
Guru Nanak never called the ego an enemy because it is sinful. He called it an enemy because it is delusional. Ego is the whisper inside the mind that says, I am separate. Separate from others. Separate from nature. Separate from the divine. And from that single illusion, every form of suffering is born. Ego says, this is mine, that is yours. I am higher, you are lower. My religion, your religion. My truth, your truth. This false division grows into jealousy, insecurity, anger, violence, greed, the entire architecture of human conflict. Nanak saw ego not as arrogance, but as a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. Because if Onkar is true, if everything is one, then the ego is a hallucination. The ego is like a wave claiming it is separate from the ocean. Humans cling to ego because it gives a sense of control, a sense of identity, a sense of I. But Nanak insisted, the stronger the ego, the weaker the soul. The more you cling, the more you suffer. He taught that real freedom begins when the shell of ego cracks open, when you stop fighting the universe and begin flowing with it, when you realize that the divine is not outside you, it is what you are made of. Nanak didn't say, destroy yourself. He said, destroy the illusion that you are alone. The death of ego is not an ending, it is a return, back to belonging, back to clarity, back to the one. Because when the ego dies, suffering loses its oxygen, and in that silence, what remains is love. Not love as emotion, but love as the natural state of a being who finally remembers we were never separate, we were never two, we have always been one.
To Guru Nanak and the gurus who followed him, music was not entertainment, it was revelation, a bridge between the human mind and the infinite. The Guru Granth Sahib is the only scripture in the world structured entirely through Raags, specific musical moods designed to shift consciousness. This was not an artistic choice, it was a spiritual technology. Each Raag is a doorway, a vibration, a precise emotional frequency. Because the gurus understood something modern neuroscience is only now beginning to realize. Music reshapes the mind, and the mind shapes the soul. Raag Asa awakens hope at dawn. Raag Sorath inflames certainty and courage. Raag Malhar cools the inner heat of suffering. Raag Kalyan opens the heart to gratitude. Raag Bhairav shakes the ego until it trembles. These were not random melodies, they were formulas. In the same way, light can be split into colors, human emotion can be split into raags. And each raag was chosen with surgical precision to carry the Shabad, the divine word, deep into the listener's consciousness. When the gurus sang, they weren't performing. They were tuning the human being like an instrument, to pull us out of fear, to soften the ego, to awaken awareness, to open the inner sky. Because Nanak knew, truth must be felt, not just understood. And music is the language the soul never forgets. The Raags of the Guru Granth Sahib are a map of human psychology, a science of emotional alchemy, a technology of transcendence hidden in rhythm and pitch. They don't just describe the divine, they create the experience of the divine. In the vibration of a raag, the boundary between seeker and truth dissolves. The singer disappears, the listener disappears. Only the one remains. This is why the gurus didn't preach philosophy. They sang it. Because music is where God becomes audible. Guru Nanak did not spread his message by preaching from a throne. He walked across deserts, mountains, temples, mosques, forests, and courts. Everywhere he went, he entered into dialogue, not to win arguments, but to awaken the truth sleeping inside every heart. He met yogis who had abandoned the world for caves high in the Himalayas. They believed freedom came from escape. Nanak asked them, "How can you claim to conquer the mind if all you've done is run from the world that triggers it?" He met priests drowning in rituals, masters of tradition but strangers to their own souls. They recited scriptures flawlessly, but their hearts trembled before power and wealth. Nanak's message cut deeper than any sermon. Without love, even the holiest words are empty breath. He stood before kings, rulers draped in gold while their people starved. Nanak's presence alone unsettled them. He didn't bow. He didn't flatter. He simply looked at them and asked, "What is the value of a crown if your people live in fear beneath its weight?" With Siddha yogis, he debated the nature of liberation. With Qazis and Brahmins, he challenged religious pride. With merchants, soldiers, and mystics, he spoke the same truth in different notes. There is no Hindu. There is no Muslim. There is only the one light shining through many lamps. These dialogues were not battles. They were mirrors. Wherever Nanak went, he reflected people back to themselves. He stripped away titles, rituals, fear, and ego until only the essence remained. Some resisted him. Some argued with him. Some laughed at him. But many, after speaking with him for only a moment, felt something break open inside, like a window they never knew existed. Through dialogue, Nanak built no empire. He sparked a revolution of consciousness. He showed that truth does not belong to temples or scriptures. It belongs to every human being willing to look within. And this is why his words traveled farther than any kingdom, deeper than any philosophy, and remain alive centuries later. Nanak did not debate to prove he was right. He spoke so others could discover what is real.
Guru Nanak's travels, or udasis, were not merely pilgrimages. They were bold journeys into the heart of humanity and culture. Traveling across Persia, Central Asia, and the Indian subcontinent, he confronted diverse religions, philosophies, and political systems. A messenger without borders. Unlike many spiritual leaders confined to a single community or doctrine, Guru Nanak spoke to kings and commoners alike, challenging corruption and ritualism. Engaged with Muslims, Hindus, and Zoroastrians, showing that the divine transcends religious labels. Used dialogue rather than confrontation, demonstrating that understanding arises from conversation, not conflict. His journeys embodied the principle of unity in diversity, proving that spirituality is not tied to geography, ethnicity, or language. Lessons from the road. The Persian journeys reveal lesser-known aspects of Nanak's mission. Inclusivity. Every person, regardless of caste or creed, could access the divine. Courage. He confronted entrenched systems of power without fear. Practical wisdom. Spirituality was lived, not theorized. Every action, word, and gesture was a lesson. These trips were as much political and social statements as spiritual exercises, advocating for justice, equality, and human dignity. A global vision. Through these travels, Guru Nanak modeled a universal spiritual outlook. Religion should connect hearts, not divide them. True devotion is active and engaged, not confined to ritual spaces. Knowledge of God comes through experience, dialogue, and reflection, not through dogma alone. His journeys remind us that spiritual insight is not stationary. It requires movement, courage, and openness to the unknown.
Guru Nanak's teachings challenged one of the most entrenched systems of his time, the caste hierarchy. He declared that social divisions based on birth, ritual, or occupation were illusory constructs that masked the essential unity of humanity. A radical idea for his time. In 15th century Punjab, caste determined every aspect of life: spiritual access, social status, and personal identity. Nanak's response was revolutionary. Spiritual equality. Every human being, regardless of birth, could connect directly with the divine. Practical equality. He dined with untouchables, sat with women in public discourses, and rejected ritualistic purity rules. Moral equality. He emphasized that virtue, not lineage, defines worth. These actions were not symbolic gestures. They were direct challenges to the social order, shaking the foundations of inherited privilege. Equality as liberation. For Nanak, caste was more than a social injustice. It was a spiritual barrier. It fostered ego, pride, and discrimination, separating humans from their true nature. It created dependency on hierarchical authority, limiting freedom of thought and action. It obstructed authentic spiritual experience, since devotion and love cannot be measured by birth or status. By rejecting caste, Nanak liberated the soul from external hierarchies, promoting a society where spiritual and moral worth was universal. Legacy of radical equality. Nanak's insistence on equality laid the ethical foundation of Sikhism, where the Guru Granth Sahib declares all humans as children of one God, inspired social reform movements across South Asia and beyond, and continues to challenge modern systems of discrimination, reminding us that true human dignity transcends labels, titles, and birthright. Guru Nanak saw equality not as charity, but as revolution, a spiritual, social, and moral imperative that continues to echo across centuries.
Guru Nanak's vision of humanity was profoundly inclusive, extending full spiritual and social recognition to women at a time when patriarchal norms dominated every aspect of life. He challenged entrenched gender hierarchies, asserting that women were equally capable of spiritual realization. A radical rejection of social norms. In 15th century Punjab, women faced restrictions on education, religious participation, and public life. Nanak countered these limitations with bold principles. Spiritual equality. He taught that women could meditate, lead prayers, and attain union with God just as men could. Social inclusion. Nanak interacted freely with women, giving them respect in public discourse and defying norms of seclusion. Critique of oppression. He openly criticized practices that marginalized women, including child marriage and dowry, emphasizing human dignity over tradition. Women as spiritual mirrors. For Nanak, women were not merely companions or caregivers. They were equal partners in humanity's spiritual journey. He used metaphors of the Divine Mother to illustrate God's nurturing and immanent presence. He emphasized that the soul is beyond gender, and devotion, wisdom, and virtue are not confined to men. He recognized women as teachers, saints, and transmitters of divine knowledge, elevating their societal and spiritual roles. Legacy of gender radicalism. Guru Nanak's teachings on women laid the foundation for gender equality in Sikhism, where women participate fully in religious, social, and political life. They challenge centuries of patriarchal domination in South Asia, sowing seeds of feminist consciousness long before modern movements, and serve as a timeless reminder that spiritual and human equality transcends gender, tradition, and societal expectation. By insisting that women are equally divine and capable, Nanak reshaped the understanding of humanity long before the language of feminism existed. Guru Nanak's revolutionary vision of equality and community found its most tangible expression in the Langar, the communal kitchen that serves free meals to all, regardless of caste, creed, or social status. What began as a simple act of feeding the hungry became a profound social and spiritual experiment, breaking barriers through bread. In a society rigidly divided by caste and wealth, Nanak's Langar challenged every social norm. No distinctions at the table. Everyone sat together, from kings to peasants, demonstrating that spiritual and human equality transcends social hierarchy. Communal service. Volunteers prepared and served the food, fostering humility, cooperation, and a sense of shared responsibility. Accessible sustenance. The Langar ensured that nourishment was a right, not a privilege, turning a meal into a lesson in justice and compassion. More than food. The Langar is not just about feeding the body, it's about transforming society. Spiritual practice in action, cooking and serving become acts of devotion, dissolving ego and fostering mindfulness. Education of equality. By sitting side by side, participants experience firsthand that differences of birth, wealth, and status are superficial. Community building. The Langar strengthens social bonds, creating a network of care and mutual respect. A legacy that crosses borders. What started in the villages and towns of Punjab now spans the globe. Sikh temples worldwide maintain langars, serving millions every year, including disaster relief and community feeding programs. The principle has inspired secular initiatives of shared meals and social solidarity across cultures. It embodies Nanak's vision that true spirituality is inseparable from practical compassion and justice. The Langar proves that a simple meal can be revolutionary, teaching equality, service, and unity in the most human of ways.
Guru Nanak is often called the founder of Sikhism, yet he never intended to establish a separate religion. His vision transcended labels, rituals, and institutional boundaries, emphasizing a universal spirituality that defied categorization. A movement, not a religion. In 15th century Punjab, communities were rigidly divided by religious, social, and caste identities. Nanak's teachings focused on direct experience of the divine rather than ritual, priesthood, or dogma, critiqued both Hindu and Muslim orthodoxy, refusing to be confined to either tradition, centered on ethical living, devotion, and equality rather than ceremonial observance. He called his followers Sikhs, meaning learners or disciples, not members of a religion. The emphasis was always on practice and consciousness, not institutional identity. Unity over division. Nanak's teachings consistently blurred religious boundaries. He preached that God is one, transcending all sects, labels, and dogma. He engaged with scholars, mystics, and common people from diverse faiths, creating dialogue instead of division. The focus was on humanity, morality, and devotion, not building a separate church or hierarchy. Legacy of a boundless vision. The formalization of Sikhism as a distinct religion came after Nanak's time, shaped by political and social needs of later generations. But Nanak's personal mission was to reveal the essence of God within all beings, regardless of religion, to challenge institutionalized oppression and rigid orthodoxy, to invite every person into a life of ethical action, love, and remembrance of the divine. By never creating Sikhism, Nanak left a timeless, borderless spiritual message,
one that continues to speak to seekers of every faith and culture.
Guru Nanak's spiritual journey was marked by a radical confrontation with empty ritual and blind tradition. He walked into both Hindu temples and Muslim mosques, preaching the same message of direct experience, love, and devotion, challenging the idea that proximity to a sacred place or performing ceremonies alone could bring one closer to God. Ritual versus reality. In Nanak's time, society equated religious identity with ceremonial observance. Hindu priests emphasized complex rituals, sacrifices, and caste rules. Muslim scholars often stressed rigid adherence to legalistic practices and formal worship. Spirituality was measured by outward conformity rather than inner transformation. Nanak rejected this framework. He taught that rituals without understanding or love are meaningless. God is not found in the outward symbols, but in truthful living, compassion, and devotion. Walking the same path everywhere. Nanak's travels, Udasis, took him across villages, temples, and mosques. He spoke to priests, Sufi mystics, yogis, and common folk, delivering the same universal message. He emphasized inner devotion over external conformity, asserting that a humble heart is holier than elaborate ceremonies. His teachings transcended religious boundaries, showing that God is beyond temples, mosques, or rituals. A timeless challenge. By confronting ritualistic complacency, Nanak encouraged personal responsibility and spiritual growth rather than reliance on intermediaries, advocated a spiritual democracy where all could access the divine without barriers, left a legacy that continues to challenge dogma, institutional authority, and empty tradition, making spirituality a matter of the heart, not a checklist.
Guru Nanak introduced the profound concept of Shabad, the divine word, as more than scripture or song. It is the vibrational essence of existence itself. According to Nanak, the universe is permeated by a sacred sound, a living vibration that connects the human soul to the divine. Shabad beyond words. Shabad is not limited to human language. It represents the eternal truth that underlies all creation. Chanting or meditating on Shabad aligns the mind, body, and spirit with the rhythm of the cosmos. It serves as a bridge between the finite human experience and the infinite divine reality. Nanak taught that listening, internalizing, and embodying Shabad transforms the seeker's consciousness, revealing God within and around us. Music as spiritual science. Nanak's emphasis on Shabad reveals a mystical understanding of sound and vibration. Every note, every rag carries a spiritual resonance capable of awakening the soul. Singing the Shabad in devotion is both a psychological and metaphysical practice, harmonizing emotions and mind. The Sikh musical tradition, Gurbani Kirtan, continues to express this principle, showing that spiritual truth can be experienced through sound and rhythm. A timeless path to unity. Shabad is a tool for transcending ego, division, and distraction. By tuning into the divine vibration, one experiences oneness with creation. It dissolves boundaries of religion, culture, and identity, offering direct communion with God. Nanak's teaching, true wisdom and liberation come not from rituals or dogma, but from listening to and living in the resonance of the divine word. In this way, the Shabad is both the cosmic heartbeat and the personal guide, inviting every seeker to hear, feel, and embody the eternal music of existence.
Guru Nanak taught that Maya, the world of illusion, is one of the greatest obstacles to spiritual awakening. It is not simply the material world itself, but the attachments, desires, and misconceptions that blind humans to the truth of God's presence. The nature of Maya. According to Nanak, Maya ensnares the mind with fleeting pleasures, status, and possessions. It creates a sense of separation from God, making humans sleepwalk through life. Spiritual ignorance arises when one equates the temporary with the eternal, mistaking shadow for substance. In essence, Maya is the veil that keeps the soul from recognizing its divine origin. Desire and the ego. Nanak emphasized that desires born from ego are the fuel of Maya. Greed, pride, lust, and attachment tie the soul to the cycles of birth and suffering. Chasing worldly rewards leads to spiritual sleep, diverting attention from the path of truth. Only disciplined devotion, honest living, and remembrance of God can break this cycle. Awakening from spiritual sleep. To overcome Maya, Nanak offered a clear prescription: Nam Simran, meditative remembrance of God's name dissolves illusion. Detachment with responsibility. Live in the world without being enslaved by it. Inner awareness. Cultivate mindfulness to recognize when desires and distractions cloud judgment. By understanding and transcending Maya, the seeker awakens to the eternal reality, seeing life as it truly is, a reflection of the one divine.
Unlike many spiritual teachers of his time, Guru Nanak did not retreat from the world into strict asceticism. Instead, he embraced the life of a householder, showing that spiritual realization could coexist with family, community, and social responsibility. Spirituality in the ordinary. Nanak taught that true devotion is not measured by withdrawal from life. The world itself is not inherently corrupt or distracting. It is our attachment and misunderstanding that creates suffering. By living as a householder, Nanak demonstrated that love, duty, and service are themselves forms of worship. Daily life, when lived with mindfulness and connection to God, becomes a vehicle for spiritual growth. Marriage and family as a spiritual practice. Nanak's choice of family life was revolutionary. Marriage to Mata Sulakni was not merely social convention, but a spiritual partnership rooted in mutual respect and devotion. Parenting and household responsibilities became a training ground for patience, humility, and compassion. Through his example, Nanak showed that every act, caring for loved ones, feeding the needy, honest work, can be a sacred duty. Rejecting false dichotomies. By choosing the householder path, Nanak challenged prevailing notions. Spirituality and worldly life are not opposites. They are interconnected arenas for practice. The path to God is accessible to everyone, not just ascetics or monks. Service to family, community, and society is equally divine as meditation in solitude. Nanak's life as a householder teaches that the sacred is woven into the fabric of ordinary life, and that true liberation comes from living with God at the center of all relationships and duties.
Guru Nanak emphasized that work is not merely a means of survival, but a sacred duty that connects the individual to the divine. He introduced the principle of Kirat Karni, advocating for honest labor as a cornerstone of spiritual life. Work as worship. For Nanak, earning an honest living is a form of devotion. Every act of honest work becomes a way to honor God and serve humanity. Labor done with integrity purifies the mind, cultivating humility and gratitude. Work is not a burden, but a channel for expressing divine will in daily life. Rejecting exploitation. Nanak's teachings challenged social and economic norms.
Exploitation, theft, or dishonesty in work distances the soul from God. True wealth is measured not by accumulation, but by fairness, generosity, and contribution. Ethical work supports a society where justice, dignity, and equality are practiced. Integration with spiritual practice. Kirat Karni is inseparable from other spiritual principles. Paired with Nam Simran, remembrance of God, and Vand Chakna, sharing with others, honest labor completes the triple path of Sikh living. Daily work becomes a practice of mindfulness, self-discipline, and ethical action. Through honest labor, individuals learn to balance worldly responsibilities with spiritual growth. Guru Nanak teaches that the ordinary act of earning a living can become extraordinary when approached with integrity, devotion, and a heart oriented toward service, making work itself a sacred journey toward God.
Guru Nanak offered a profound perspective on the nature of evil, reframing it not as a cosmic force, but as the absence of awareness and understanding of the divine. Evil as ignorance. For Nanak, wrongdoing arises from spiritual blindness rather than inherent malevolence. People act in harmful ways because they fail to recognize God in themselves and others. Darkness and suffering are symptoms of separation from divine consciousness, not forces to be worshipped or feared. By illuminating the mind with remembrance and love of God, one dissolves the shadows of evil. Responsibility and awakening. Nanak's teaching places the solution within human agency. Every individual has the capacity to recognize the divine presence and transform actions from harmful to compassionate. Ethical living, devotion, and reflection are tools to combat ignorance, the root of suffering. Evil loses its grip when people see unity in all creation, transcending fear, hatred, and division. Practical implications. This insight shapes how followers approach life and society. Social injustices are addressed not only through laws, but through awareness, education, and compassion. Spiritual practice is a light that converts internal darkness into clarity and love. Recognizing God in all beings transforms relationships, communities, and the self, making evil a temporary absence rather than a permanent reality. Guru Nanak teaches that evil is not an external power, but a failure to perceive the sacred, and that through consciousness, love, and remembrance, humanity can restore light where there was darkness.
Guru Nanak's passing is surrounded by a story that reflects his radical vision of unity beyond religious divisions. When he fell ill and approached death, followers of both Hindu and Muslim faiths came to perform the last rites. The miracle of unity. According to tradition, both groups prepared their respective funeral rites, Hindus with a pyre, Muslims with burial rites. When they uncovered Nanak's body, they found only flowers instead of a corpse. This miraculous event was interpreted as a sign of the divine transcending human labels and rituals. The spiritual lesson. The story carries a deeper philosophical message. Truth cannot be confined by dogma, it belongs to all of humanity. Death is not an end, but a transformation, emphasizing the impermanence of the body and the immortality of the soul. Nanak's life and passing challenge divisions, showing that spiritual essence transcends religion, caste, and culture. Legacy of the parable. The dual funeral became a lasting symbol. Followers realized that external forms of religion are secondary to inner realization.
Nanak's teachings encourage respect for multiple paths while affirming the oneness of God. His passing is remembered as a living lesson in harmony, tolerance, and the universality of spiritual truth. Guru Nanak's life was not just the story of a single individual. It was the beginning of a spiritual lineage that continues to guide humanity centuries later. His teachings, actions, and example created a living tradition of wisdom, compassion, and devotion that transcends time and geography. The voice that never fades. Nanak's words, recorded in the Guru Granth Sahib, serve as a perpetual guide for seekers. Through hymns, poetry, and spiritual instructions, his voice speaks across generations, offering insight into love, justice, and the human soul. His emphasis on direct experience of the divine ensures that followers engage with truth personally, not merely as doctrine. A lineage of light. After Nanak, 9 successive gurus continued his mission, embodying the same principles of equality, humility, and devotion. This lineage ensured that the message remained alive, practical, and transformative, not static or frozen in history. The succession created a community, Sangat, and institution, Sikhism, that channels Nanak's light into social, spiritual, and ethical life. Impact beyond time. Nanak's influence is not confined to Sikhs. His teachings resonate globally, inspiring interfaith dialogue, social justice, and ethical living. By challenging ritualism, caste, and prejudice, he offered a vision of humanity unified by the divine. The eternal voice of Nanak reminds us that one enlightened life can ripple outward, touching countless others and shaping the moral and spiritual landscape. Guru Nanak's legacy is living light, a beacon that continues to illuminate hearts, dissolve divisions, and guide humanity towards truth, love, and unity.